My name is Juniper Castellano, and I just turned 18. At my birthday dinner 2 nights ago, my father pulled me into the hallway and said, "Once things settle down, you'll need to sign some papers for Uncle Dean. Just a formality, nothing to worry about." I nodded. I smiled. Then I went up to my room, opened my laptop, and quietly accepted my grandparents' entire estate into an irrevocable trust that had been sitting there waiting for me for 6 years. The next morning, my parents and my little brother found out that the boatyard, the workshop, the savings, all of it, was locked behind a legal wall none of them could touch. My father's face went the color of old sailcloth. My uncle, who had already signed a deal to sell property that was never his, called 3 different lawyers before noon. Before I tell you what happened, hit like and subscribe, and drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're all watching from. Now let me take you back 6 years, to a summer at Pinnacle Cove when my grandfather said something I didn't understand until 2 nights ago. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather, August Castellano, everyone called him Augie, picked me up in his salt-rusted pickup and drove me out to Pinnacle Cove, 40 minutes past the last stoplight in town. Castellano Boatworks sat right on the water, 3 low buildings and a long dock, weathered gray shingles, the smell of cedar shavings and marine varnish drifting out of the main shed before you even opened the door. "Grab the sander," Grandpa said, handing me a block wrapped in worn sandpaper. "You go with the grain. Fight it, and it fights back." We spent that whole morning refinishing the hull of an old wooden daysailor someone had brought in for restoration. He never rushed me. He showed me how to run my palm flat across the wood to feel for the spots I'd missed, the ones that still caught rough under my fingers. Inside the little office attached to the main shed, my grandmother Corinne had sandwiches and sun tea waiting on the workbench, the one Grandpa had built with his own hands the year they got married. She read paperback mysteries on the dock chair in the afternoons, and she'd pat the seat beside her when I came out, and we'd watch the boats come in until the light went gold on the water. "This yard stays in the family," Grandpa told me that evening, wiping sawdust off his forearms. "But family isn't only blood, Junie. Family is whoever shows up and does the work." I was 12. I thought he was just being sentimental. He wasn't. That whole summer I came back to Pinnacle Cove nearly every weekend. I learned which slip pilings needed replacing, how to bleed air out of the outboard fuel lines, how to read the tide chart taped inside the shed door. In October, Grandma taught me to organize the tool wall by silhouette, tracing each shape in black marker so nothing ever went missing. Grandpa walked the property line with me once, pointing out the old iron boundary markers he'd set himself back in 1978. I didn't know then that he was already sitting down with a lawyer about exactly this place. About exactly me. Back home, things felt different. Our house in Millbrook was fine. For bedrooms, a 2-car garage my father used as storage for the boat brokerage he ran out of a strip mall office. Fine. Not warm. Just fine. My younger brother Oliver was 11, and he'd just made the travel hockey team, so his side of the garage was full of new gear, a stick that cost more than an entire month of my grocery job paycheck. At dinner, my father brought up the boatyard. "Dad's place is just sitting there bleeding money," Neil said, cutting into his chicken. "Insurance, dock maintenance, property taxes. We should think about selling, put it towards something that actually pays us back." My mother, Paige, nodded along. "Grandpa said the yard stays in the family," I said. My father laughed, not a cruel laugh, worse, a dismissive one. "You were 12, Junie. He was just being nice to you. Nobody asked me anything else." Conversation moved straight to Oliver's tryout scores. Very impressive. My mother had already texted the whole extended family a photo of his jersey. I'd placed second in the regional robotics competition 3 weeks earlier. The trophy was still in the trunk of the car. After dinner, while I cleared plates, I found a glossy flyer half buried under a stack of mail on the counter. Titterline Cove Residences. Waterfront lots. Premium pricing, now accepting reservations. Someone had scrawled a phone number in the margin in handwriting that wasn't my father's. I put the flyer back exactly where I'd found it and went upstairs. I sat on my bed and thought about Grandpa's workbench, about Grandma setting down my sandwich without ever having to ask what I wanted, because she already knew. I thought about that flyer sitting downstairs. Somebody was already pricing out my grandparents' whole life in dollar signs. Grandpa Augie died 2 years later. I was 14. The funeral was on a Thursday, gray sky, damp folding chairs sinking into the churchyard grass. I sat in the second row holding his old flannel shirt, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and diesel. At the reception, I noticed my father and his younger brother, my Uncle Dean, standing near the coffee urn, not eating, talking low, a folder tucked under Dean's arm. My father kept nodding. I caught one line from Dean. "We should get ahead of this before probate makes it complicated." They were talking about the boatyard at the funeral. I said nothing. I was 14. I had no power, no voice, and no idea that my grandfather had already planned for this exact moment. 2 years after that, I was 16. My grandmother Corinne got sick that spring and was gone by early summer. She held my hand the last time I visited her, her grip still surprisingly strong. "The boatyard is yours, Junie," she whispered. "Don't let them take it. Promise me." "I promise, Grandma." She squeezed once and closed her eyes. After the second funeral, another gray day, same sinking folding chairs, my father sat at our kitchen table and told my mother, "Now we can finally sort out the property." He said it with relief, like something heavy had finally lifted off him. That same night I heard him on the phone in the garage, pacing. "Yeah, no, I agree, let's get it moving." His voice was lighter than it had been in weeks. I stood in the hallway holding a glass of water and understood something that settled into my chest like a stone. My grandmother's death wasn't a loss to them. It was an opening. I didn't cry that night. I made a different kind of decision instead. I just didn't know yet how to act on it. Between 16 and almost 18, the boatyard became my quiet rebellion. Every Saturday morning I drove out to Pinnacle Cove in the second-hand pickup I'd bought with 2 years of grocery store paychecks. I recaulked the seams on the old Daysailor. I replaced the rotted boards on the dock ramp. I swept the gutters on the main shed because Grandpa had taught me that's exactly how leaks start. At home, the language shifted. The boatyard stopped being Grandpa's place and started being the family asset. My father said it at dinner like it had always been true. Uncle Dean started coming around more, every other Sunday, sometimes with a folder, sometimes with his laptop open to commercial listings. I tried once. "What about Grandma's wish?" "She wanted me to keep it." My mother set down her fork gently, the way she did before correcting Oliver's homework. "Grandma was very emotional at the end, sweetie. This is business now." Business. That's the word they used for everything that used to be love. By 17, my father had gotten more direct about it. "When you turn 18, we'll figure this out as a family," he'd say, and I understood exactly what he meant by family. It meant his way. One November afternoon, alone at the boatyard, I was reorganizing the tool chest in the back of the main shed, the one Grandpa built with a false bottom for spare hardware. Underneath a roll of old canvas sailcloth, I found a small envelope wrapped in oilcloth, my name written across the front in Grandma Curran's handwriting. Inside was a single business card. Deborah Ashworth, attorney at law. Beneath her name, in smaller print, Castellano Family Trust. My hands weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from recognition. Grandma had left this here for me to find. She knew I'd be the one going through that chest. Eventually. Not my father. Not Dean. Me. I slid the card into my wallet. I didn't call. Not yet. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Deborah Ashworth called me first. It was a Thursday evening in late winter. I was at the kitchen table finishing a chemistry worksheet when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar local number. Juniper, this is Deborah Ashworth. I represented your grandparents. Her voice was calm, deliberate, careful, like someone who'd rehearsed the opening more than once. I need to speak with you before your birthday. There are things you should know, and there isn't much time. She asked me to meet her the following Saturday at her office downtown. Alone. I went. Deborah Ashworth was in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a beaded chain. Her office smelled like coffee and old paper, one wall lined with sailing charts and frames. She opened a folder across her desk. Your grandparents hired me 7 years ago, she said. They set up an irrevocable trust. The boatyard property, the business itself, the operating accounts, and investment portfolio. Total value, just over $1.9 million. All of it sits inside that trust. You're the sole named beneficiary. The room tilted slightly under me. They moved everything into the trust while they were both still alive, she continued. Legally, none of it ever entered their personal estate. It bypasses probate entirely. Your father and your uncle have no claim to any of it. She slid a summary document across the desk, my name printed on the second line. The deed to the property was recorded under the trust at the county registry 7 years ago. Your father has no idea. Why didn't they ever tell him? Deborah paused. Your grandfather said, and these are his exact words as I wrote them down, my sons will have that yard listed before the flowers on my grave have wilted. The office went quiet. I stared at the paper with my name on it. There's something else, Deborah said. Someone's been making inquiries at the Registry of Deeds about this property within the last month. I started paying attention after that, not suspiciously, just quietly. The following Sunday, Uncle Dean came over for dinner. Afterward, he and my father disappeared into the garage. The door was open a crack, not enough to see through, but enough to hear. Dean's voice, I already signed a letter of intent with Titteline. For 20 for the whole parcel, buildings included. But we need clean title before closing. My father, how do we get it clean? Power of attorney. Dad signed one over to me years back, before he got sick, for the business account. It's broad enough. I can use it to execute a deed on his behalf, then transfer it to us as next of kin once probate clears the rest of the estate. Is that even legal? It's paperwork, Neil. Nobody at the registry reads the fine print that closely. A pause, then my father, quieter. What about Junie? My chest tightened. Dean's answer came fast, like he'd already rehearsed it. She's 17, Neil. She can't do anything about it. By the time she's 18, the sale's already closed. Done deal. She'll be upset for a while, she'll get over it. We'll cut her in. 40 grand for trade school or whatever. She should be grateful for that much. I stepped back from the garage door. My hands had gone cold. Dean had already signed a letter of intent, for $120,000, with a developer, for a boatyard he didn't own, sitting on land held inside a trust he didn't even know existed. That night I sat on my bed and texted Deborah 2 words. They're moving faster. Her reply came back in under 3 minutes. I expected that. Come see me Saturday. We'll get everything ready for you. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. In the next room, Oliver was watching something, laughing at whatever was on the screen. Downstairs, my parents were loading the dishwasher, talking about weekend plans like nothing at all was happening. Somewhere in Dean's folder was a letter of intent that was already, without him knowing it, worthless. Saturday, Deborah's office. She laid the whole timeline out on a legal pad, drawing connecting lines between dates like a battle plan. The property's already titled to the trust, she said. If Dean tries to record a power of attorney deed, the registry should reject it outright, because the chain of title won't match. It hasn't been in your grandparents' personal names in 7 years. But if he files additional paperwork alongside it, an affidavit of heirship, maybe something backdated to make it look cleaner, he could create what's called a cloud on the title. That won't give him ownership, but it could tie the property up in litigation for a year or more. So I have to act first. You have to act on time. She tapped the calendar. The moment you turn 18, you're a legal adult in every sense that matters. You can formally accept your role as trust beneficiary. Once you sign, I file a notice of adverse claim at the county registry, first thing the next morning. That freezes the title. Nothing conflicting can be recorded against it after that. I nodded. What do I need to do? Show up. Sign one document. I'll handle everything else. I sat with that for a moment. Should I tell my parents? Deborah took off her glasses. Your grandfather specifically asked me to protect you, Juniper. Not to negotiate on your behalf with them. I drove home. My father was in the kitchen, cheerful. Good news, kiddo. Your mother and I are throwing you a birthday dinner. Whole family, Saturday night. Big one, 18 only happens once. He smiled. My mother smiled. Even Oliver looked up from his phone and gave a small nod of approval. I smiled too. My father was planning my birthday dinner. My uncle was planning to sell my grandparents' boatyard out from under all 3 of us. And I sat at the kitchen table smiling, because in 9 days I was going to let them believe everything was proceeding exactly on their schedule. I want to be honest with you here. Sitting in my room that night, knowing what was coming, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Part of me wanted to walk downstairs and just say it, Dad, I know. But Deborah was right. If I tipped them off, they'd only find another way around it. So I stayed quiet, and I waited. Here's a question for you. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments, I read every one. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because this story is about to turn. 5 days before my birthday, my mother sat down beside me on the couch, using her let's talk like adults voice, soft, practiced, faintly rehearsed. Now that you're almost 18, Paige said, there are some family decisions we should be making together. Together. The word landed like a costume 2 sizes too big. The boatyard costs money to maintain, she went on. Insurance, dock repairs, property taxes. Your father's brokerage has been struggling. If we sell, we could clear the debt and set up a real college fund for you and Oliver both. Grandma wanted me to keep it, I said. Her expression flickered, a flash of impatience, quickly smoothed back over. Your grandmother was very sentimental toward the end, Junie. But sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. My father walked in right on cue, like they'd rehearsed the timing. I've already talked to a buyer, he said. Good price, fair deal. Dean's got the connections. What company? Some development group. Dean vouches for them. They're reputable. I didn't push. I'll think about it, I said. My father patted my shoulder. That's my girl. He walked off looking satisfied, like he'd just closed a negotiation. Later that night Oliver knocked on my door, still in his hockey socks, hair damp from a shower. Junie? Yeah. He sat on the edge of my bed, picking at a loose thread on my comforter. Mom and Dad keep talking about the boatyard at night, after they think I'm asleep. He glanced at me sideways. They sound different. Like they're planning something. Different how? Like they're excited, but also nervous. He paused. Is something going on? I pulled the blanket over his sock feet. Don't worry about it, Ollie. He nodded, unconvinced. I'd told them I'd think about it. That wasn't a yes, and they knew it, which was exactly why they'd keep pushing. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Dean showed up unannounced, catching me in the driveway as I came back from my shift at the grocery store. Casual clothes, easy smile, leaning against his car like he'd just happened to be in the neighborhood. Dean sold commercial real estate for a living. Nothing he did was ever accidental. Hey, kiddo, got a minute? Just want to talk. We sat on the front steps. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Here's the thing, Junie. That waterfront parcel, land alone, is worth $420. I've got a buyer lined up. Fast, close, clean paperwork. And what do I get out of it? $40,000, cash, for whatever you want, school, a car, whatever. I let the number sit in the air. 40 out of 420. He smiled like I'd said something cute. You're 18 in 3 days, Junie. 40 grand is real money for someone your age. Most kids would jump at that. Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Dean? The smile froze for half a second, a flicker behind his eyes, then it smoothed back over. Your grandparents, but they're gone now. It passes to your dad and me as next of kin. That's not how it works. I knew it. He should have known it too. He sold real estate professionally, but he was counting on me not knowing. I'll think about it, I said again. He stood, brushed off his jeans. Don't overthink this one, Junie. Opportunities like this don't wait around. He drove off, already on the phone before he reached the end of the street. I could see his mouth moving through the windshield. That night I texted Deborah again. They're accelerating. She replied, stay the course. 3 more days. 3 more days. I could do 3 more days. The night before my birthday, I drove out to the boatyard alone. The road was quiet, Pinnacle Cove sat flat and dark under a sliver of moon, the masts of the moored sailboats swaying like metronomes. I parked in the gravel lot Grandpa had leveled himself, climbed the porch steps to the little office, second one still creaking exactly the way it always had, and sat in the chair beside the one that used to be his. The air smelled like salt and cedar and rain coming. I checked my email. Deborah had sent the full document package, acceptance of successor beneficiary, beneficiary designation confirmation, a 1-page summary of trust terms, everything tabbed and flagged, ready for a single signature. Mine. At midnight I read each document twice. Then I closed the laptop and just listened to the water lapping against the pilings. Grandpa used to sit right in this spot and say, patience isn't weakness, Junie. It's timing. I always thought he meant fishing. Turns out he meant this. The tears came without warning, not a collapse, just a quiet overflow I let happen. I cried because I wished this were different. I wished my father had been the kind of man who'd taken me fishing off that dock instead of pricing the water beneath it. I wished my mother had once asked what I wanted instead of telling me what was practical. I wished I didn't have to sign a legal document alone at midnight to protect myself from the people who were supposed to protect me. But wishes don't hold up at the registry of deeds. Trust documents do. I wiped my face, locked the office door, drove home, lay down, and set my alarm for 11:45. 11:50. My bedroom door was shut, the house completely silent. My parents had gone to bed an hour earlier and Oliver's light had gone dark at 10. I opened my laptop and connected to the video call. Deborah appeared in her home office, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, a stack of papers under a desk lamp. Ready? Ready. The moment the clock hits midnight, you're a legal adult in every sense that matters. I'll walk you through the signature. She went through it once more, clear and unhurried. I signed the acceptance of successor beneficiary, one page, confirming I was formally accepting the trust my grandparents had built for exactly this moment. From that second on, every decision about the trust's assets ran through me and Deborah as co-trustees. First thing tomorrow morning, she said, 8 a.m., I'll be at the registry filing a notice of adverse claim. Once it's recorded, nothing can be sold, transferred, or encumbered while it's active. What if they've already filed something? Then whatever they filed gets flagged. The chain of title will show the trust recorded 7 years ago, not your father, not Dean. Any conflicting document gets kicked back automatically. I looked down at the signed page in my hand, my name in ink beneath my grandparents' printed names. Deborah's voice softened just slightly. This isn't a trick, Juniper. This is your grandfather's last gift to you. You just had to be old enough to accept it. My laptop clock read 12:03. I was 18. I was the legal beneficiary of the Castellano family irrevocable trust. And somewhere across town, my uncle's forged power of attorney deed was already a dead document. He just wouldn't find that out for another 9 hours. Across town in his condo kitchen, Dean Castellano was printing documents. I didn't know this at the time, I pieced it together later, partly from what the registry clerk told Deborah, partly from what my father eventually admitted during one of our harder conversations. But here's what happened that same night. While I was signing my acceptance form upstairs, Dean printed a special warranty deed, transferring the boatyard property using a power of attorney his father had signed years before for narrow, unrelated business purposes, a document that had expired the moment Grandpa died. He called my father at 11:30. Everything's ready. We file at 9. Registry opens at 8, but I want Ginny distracted with birthday stuff first. You sure about this, Dean? They're gone, Neil. We're next of kin. It's simple. It wasn't simple. It was a stale legal instrument being used as though it still had teeth. Dean also had a second document open on his laptop, a letter of intent with Titaline Development Partners, purchase price $420,000, closing 30 days after the deed was recorded. If Dean couldn't deliver clean title inside that window, he'd owe Titaline a $35,000 penalty plus damages. He'd signed that letter 2 months earlier, before the title had ever actually been searched, before anyone had verified the property was even part of the estate at all. He'd simply assumed. Dean had bet nearly $500,000 on a piece of paper that didn't belong to him. He just didn't know it yet. My birthday dinner started at 5 that Saturday. The Boatyard Clubhouse, the same little function room where Grandpa used to host the summer regatta banquet, was full, maybe 25 people, cousins, a few of my mother's co-workers, Oliver's hockey teammates and their parents. Sal Pereira, who'd run the Marina Fuel dock next door for 30 years, sat near the window with a coffee and a pair of sharp, watchful eyes. Balloons, a banner reading Happy 18th in blue foil letters, a sheet cake from the bakery on Water Street. I smiled. I thanked everyone. I opened small gifts, a paperback, a gift card, a framed photo of the yard. In my jacket pocket, folded into a neat square, was the signed acceptance form from the night before. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. It was already done. My father stood near the cake table and tapped his glass. The room quieted. I just want to say Juniper's officially an adult today. Her mother and I are so proud of her. He paused, looking around the room. And as a family, we've got some exciting plans for the future. He looked right at me. Right, Junie? Every face turned toward me. Thanks, Dad, I said. Nothing more. He waited a beat, then laughed it off and raised his glass. The room followed. Conversation resumed. From the corner of my eye I saw Dean by the door, checking his phone, thumbs moving fast. Sal caught my arm as I passed the drink table, leaning in close, smelling like diesel and peppermint gum. Your grandmother would want you to know something, he said quietly. I saw your uncle out at the yard last week with 2 men in suits, walking the shoreline with a measuring wheel. Dean had already brought the buyers to the property before he even had the title. That's how confident he'd been. After the cake was cut, my father stood again, louder this time, more deliberate, the voice of a man who'd been waiting for an audience. Before we wrap up, I want to share something. He put his hand on my mother's shoulder. Our family's been going through a tough stretch financially. Some of you know about the brokerage. It's been hard. Sympathetic murmurs. But Augie and Corinne, my parents, they left us something. The boatyard out at Pinnacle Cove. And as a family, we've decided to sell it, to secure everyone's future. We've decided. The words landed on my skin like cold seawater. He was announcing it to 25 people like it was already settled. He looked straight at me. Junie understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us. Right, sweetheart? The room waited. Every eye found me. Sal with his coffee. Oliver, half hidden behind a folding chair. My mother added, smiling, it's what responsible families do. We sacrifice for each other. I set my fork down. The clink was the only sound in the room. I never agreed to sell the boatyard, Dad. My father's smile stayed fixed, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. She's kidding. Birthday nerves. I'm not kidding. Dean stepped forward from the doorway. Come on, Junie. This isn't the time. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, set it down. You're right, Uncle Dean. This isn't the time. I held his gaze. The time is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Silence. Dean's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. The guests started leaving after that, quiet goodbyes, tight smiles, the kind of exit people make when they can feel a storm building inside someone else's house. Within 30 minutes it was down to family, Sal, and 2 neighbors who seemed unsure whether to leave or stay. My mother waited until the front door closed behind the last near stranger, then turned on me in the kitchen, voice controlled but pitched to Carrie. Do you have any idea what your father is going through? She stepped closer. He might lose the brokerage, Junie. And you're holding on to a boatyard you visit on weekends. I visit every weekend, Mom. That's not the point. We're a family. Families make decisions together. And if you love this family, you wouldn't need a lawyer to tell you what to do. The room went still. How do you know about a lawyer? My mother didn't flinch. Dean found a business card in your wallet last week. Deborah Ashworth. Who is she, Junie? My stomach dropped, not from fear, from the realization that they'd been going through my things, hunting for something to use against me. Before I could answer, Sal's voice cut through from the kitchen doorway, even and firm. That girl has every right to talk to a lawyer, Paige. Corinne would have wanted her to. My mother wheeled around. This is a family matter, Sal. Please. He didn't move. He looked at me, then back at her. Corinne was my friend for 30 years. I think I know exactly what she wanted. The silence between them could have cracked glass. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Not yet. Sal left. The remaining neighbors slipped out behind him with quiet goodbyes. Now it was just the 5 of us. My father closed the kitchen door. The overhead light buzzed. He pulled out a chair, sat, folded his hands on the table like a man about to deliver terms. Here's what's going to happen, Junie. His voice was low, deliberate. Tomorrow morning, Dean and I go to the registry. We file the paperwork. The yard sells. You get your share, a fair share, and we move on as a family. What's my share? 40,000. Out of how much? He didn't answer. Dean, leaning against the door frame, filled the gap. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my father. And if I say no? His jaw set. If you fight this, you're on your own. No help with school. No roof over your head. The kitchen went very quiet. The faucet dripped once. You're threatening to kick me out on my 18th birthday. I'm asking you to be part of this family. I pushed back from the table, stood, my voice steady even if my hands weren't. I am part of this family, Dad. I'm the part that keeps promises. I walked past Dean, past Oliver, who sat on the stairs with his knees pulled to his chest, and went up to my room. I closed the door, sat on my bed, and breathed. My father thought his deadline was 9 a.m. at the Registry of Deeds. He didn't know Deborah's deadline was 8. I sat there that night holding the acceptance form I'd already signed at midnight. My father had just threatened to remove me from my own family if I didn't hand over property that was legally mine. My mother had told me I didn't love them. My uncle was planning to file a forged deed first thing in the morning. And all I could think was that my grandmother had been right. She'd known exactly who they would become once the money was on the table, and she'd planned for it years before it ever happened. If someone you loved ever quietly prepared something to protect you, even after they were gone, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. Now. Let me tell you what happened at 8 a.m. The Registry of Deeds opened its doors. The fluorescent lights flickered on. A clerk in a green cardigan unlocked the front counter. Deborah Ashworth was the first person through the door, gray blazer, leather folder under her arm. She approached the counter, presented a certified copy of the Castellano Family Irrevocable Trust and a notice of adverse claim, and asked for them to be recorded against the Pinnacle Cove parcel. The clerk reviewed the paperwork, checked the existing title chain, and stamped it recorded. Done. From that moment forward, anyone pulling title on the property would see a notice of pending legal interest. Castellano Family Irrevocable Trust, Deborah Ashworth, Trustee, Juniper Castellano, Beneficiary. At 8:14, Deborah called me. It's done. The notice is recorded. The property's flagged. Whatever they bring in this morning gets rejected on chain of title. I was at the kitchen table eating cereal. My father was upstairs getting dressed. My mother was making coffee. Normal morning sounds, water running, a closet door, a belt buckle clinking shut. At 8:30, my father and Dean came downstairs together. My father wore his business shirt, the one he used to wear to bank meetings before the brokerage started struggling. Dean had a folder tucked under his arm, the same folder as always. We'll be back by lunch, my father said, grabbing his keys. I looked up from my bowl. Good luck, I said. He paused in the doorway, something in my voice, or my face, catching him for a second. Then he turned and walked out. I rinsed my cereal bowl, dried it, set it back in the cabinet, and waited. I'll never know exactly what their faces looked like, but I know what happened, because Deborah was still at the registry when they walked in. She'd stayed on purpose. At 9:05, Dean approached the counter and slid the deed across with a confident nod. My father stood behind him, hands in his pockets, glancing around the room like they'd be in and out in 10 minutes. The clerk took the document, typed the parcel number into the system, read the screen, typed again, then stopped. I can't record this, sir. Dean leaned forward. Excuse me? This property is held under the Castellano Family Irrevocable Trust. It was recorded 7 years ago. There's also a notice of adverse claim filed this morning. That's impossible, Dean said. My parents owned that property. Sir, the deed transferred to the trust 7 years ago. The chain of title is clear. This document doesn't match the current record. My father stepped up beside him. There's no trust. Our parents never mentioned a trust. The clerk glanced between them. I'd suggest speaking with the trustee listed on the filing. A Deborah Ashworth. Dean's hand went flat on the counter. His face drained. Deborah's name, the same name they'd found on the card in my wallet, was now sitting on a public record they couldn't erase. My father turned to Dean, slow. You said this was simple. I didn't know about any trust. You sell commercial real estate for a living, Dean. How do you not check the title first? Dean opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The clerk said evenly, Gentlemen, I'll need you to step outside if this becomes a disagreement. Deborah, seated in the waiting area, watched them go. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The call came at 9:22. I was sitting on the porch, watching Sal's sprinkler arc across his front lawn next door. What did you do? My father's voice was tight, shaking. Traffic noise behind him, he was in the parking lot. I accepted what Grandpa and Grandma left me. That's all. You went behind our backs with some lawyer we've never even heard of. Deborah Ashworth has been the trust attorney for 7 years, Dad. You just never asked. A beat of silence, heavy breathing. This is my parents' property, Junie. I'm their son. They should have left it to me. I kept my voice even. Not because they didn't love you. Because they didn't trust you with it. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. I counted 3 full sprinkler arcs before he spoke again. We'll fight this. You can try. But the trust is irrevocable. That means even I can't undo it if I wanted to. There's nothing left for anyone to contest. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, Dad. I've had 3 months to learn. He hung up, no goodbye, just a click and dead air. I set the phone on the porch railing. My hands were shaking, not from anger, not from fear, from the weight of having said those words out loud to my own father. From knowing that the man who'd taught me to tie a bowline knot when I was 7 was the same man who'd just tried to sell my grandparents' life's work out from under me. I sat there until the shaking stopped. It took a while. Then my phone buzzed again, an unfamiliar number, a brisk, corporate voice. Ms. Castellano, this is Priya Desai from Titiline Development Partners. We need to talk. Priya spoke the way developers do, fast, factual, already 3 moves ahead of the current sentence. We have a letter of intent with Dean Castellano for the Pinnacle Cove property. He represented clean title. We've just been informed there's an adverse claim on the parcel. That's correct. Can you explain the situation? My uncle doesn't own that property. He never did. The land and the business have been held in an irrevocable trust since before my grandfather died. I'm the sole beneficiary. A pause, papers shifting on the other end. He represented himself as the heir. Representation doesn't create ownership, Ms. Desai. I'd recommend you speak with your own attorney. Another pause, longer this time. Is there any possibility of a sale directly with the trust? The property is not for sale. Understood. Her voice hardened slightly. Then we'll be pursuing our remedies against Mr. Castellano. I gave her Deborah's number. Within the hour, Deborah confirmed to Titteline's legal team what I'd already told Priya. The trust was valid, Dean had no authority, and the letter of intent had been executed based on a misrepresentation of ownership. Titteline's response was immediate. They'd pursue Dean for breach of contract, the $35,000 penalty clause, plus damages. That afternoon, Deborah called with one more piece of information, her voice careful but direct. Juniper, the power of attorney Dean tried to use, it expired automatically the moment your grandfather passed. Using it to execute a deed afterward isn't just invalid, it's a criminal misrepresentation. The registry's already flagged it for review. I closed my eyes. That's serious, isn't it? In this state, yes. Very. My uncle hadn't just tried to steal the boatyard. He'd broken the law trying to do it. My father came home at 2 that afternoon, moving through the front door like a man carrying something invisible and very heavy. My mother was already in the kitchen, arms crossed, face blotched from what I guessed was an hour of angry crying. I was at the dining table. I didn't get up. He sat across from me and stared at the table for a long time. I'm going to lose the brokerage, Junie, he said finally, his voice flat, hollowed out. The bank's been on me for $160,000. That property was supposed to be our way out. I know you're struggling, Dad. I'm sorry about the business. Then help us. The boatyard was never your way out. It was Grandpa and Grandma's gift to me. A gift? He almost laughed. For what? What does an 18-year-old need with a working boatyard? It's not about what I need. It's about what they wanted. My mother stepped in from the doorway. They were old, Junie. They weren't thinking clearly at the end. They were thinking clearly enough to hire a lawyer 7 years before they died. My father slammed his palm on the table. I'll contest the trust. A voice came through my phone, sitting on speaker on the table. I'd called Deborah before he walked in, left the line open, not to trap him, just to save time. Mr. Castellano, she said, steady and professional, contesting an irrevocable trust that was established 7 years before the grantor's deaths, with full legal capacity documented and witnessed, will cost you far more in legal fees than the property is worth. I'd strongly advise against it. The kitchen went silent. The faucet dripped. My father looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen there before. Not anger. Recognition. 2 hours later, Dean called the house. My father picked up in the living room. I stood in the hallway, close enough to hear every word through the thin wall. Titteline's suing me, Dean said, his voice stripped raw. $35,000 in penalties plus damages. They're saying misrepresentation. My father's reply was cold, colder than I'd ever heard him. Did you know the power of attorney had expired? I thought it still covered this. Dean, you sell real estate for a living. How do you not know when a POA expires? I assumed. You assumed. And now I've got nothing because you assumed. You wanted the money too. I didn't use an expired legal document to forge a deed, Dean. A long silence. I need a lawyer, Dean finally said. So do I. My father paused. Don't call this house again until you've talked to one. He hung up. I heard him sit down on the couch, the springs creaking, then nothing. I went upstairs. Oliver's door was open, headphones around his neck, eyes wide. Is Uncle Dean in trouble? Yeah, Ollie. He is. Is Dad? I sat on the edge of his bed. Dad made bad choices. Uncle Dean made worse ones. He nodded slowly, processing it the way 14-year-olds do, not fully understanding, but knowing enough to be scared. Over the following 3 weeks, the consequences fell like dominoes, and each one made a sound. Titleline Development Partners filed a civil suit against Dean Castellano, breach of contract, misrepresentation of title, demanding the $35,000 penalty plus an additional $50,000 in damages and legal costs. Their attorney sent the complaint by certified mail to Dean's condo. He signed for it on a Wednesday. The county district attorney's office received a referral regarding the expired power of attorney used to execute a fraudulent conveyance. An investigator was assigned. Dean's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome, which meant his income stopped almost overnight. Word travels in a small coastal town, not because I said anything, I didn't, but court filings are public record, and Titleine's lawsuit named the Pinnacle Cove parcel by number. The neighbors along the cove read the local paper. They talked. By the second week, the story had made its way through the Marina Association, the church coffee hour, and the checkout line at the general store. Dean called me once. I answered. Junie, please, can you ask your lawyer to drop the claim? If the title clears, maybe I can renegotiate the penalty with Titleline. The claim protects my property, Uncle Dean. It stays. Your grandparents would be ashamed of you. I let the sentence sit for a moment. Then I said quietly, my grandparents are the ones who set this up. They chose this. They chose me. So I don't think shame is what they'd feel. He hung up. I set the phone down and looked at the wall. There was a framed photo of Grandpa on my desk, the one from this summer I was 12, both of us standing by the day sailor we'd refinished. I left it exactly where it was. My father didn't contest the trust. Deborah had been right, the legal fees alone would have buried him, and the case would have gone nowhere against an irrevocable trust that was properly witnessed and recorded years before the deaths of the grantors. Instead, he did what he probably should have done 2 years earlier. He sold the brokerage at a loss, enough to negotiate a repayment plan with the bank. The house stayed, barely. My mother went back to work for the first time in over a decade, a receptionist position at a dental office on Fenwick Street. She didn't talk about it much. When people asked, she said she wanted to stay busy. Nobody quite believed that, but nobody pushed. The town knew. Not every detail, but enough. Augie Castellano's sons tried to sell his boatyard, and his granddaughter stopped them. That's the version that made the rounds at the diner, the Marina Association meetings, the gas station out on Route 9. Some people thought I was brave. Some thought I was cold. I didn't correct either group. My father and I didn't speak for nearly 2 weeks after that morning. The house sat quiet in a way that felt permanent, like the silence itself had weight. Sal brought me a container of clam chowder one afternoon, still warm. Your parents made their choices, he said, setting it on my desk. But they're still your parents. Don't carry their shame. That one's theirs to keep. I nodded. Then Oliver called one evening, from a friend's house, boy small. Junie? Yeah. I don't understand everything that happened, but I'm sorry they put you through it. My throat tightened. Thanks, Ollie. You doing okay? Getting there. I drove out to the boatyard on a Saturday morning in late spring. The beach roses along the cove road were just starting to bud, pale pink against the gray water. I unlocked the office door with the same key Grandpa had given me when I was 14. In case you ever need to get in when we're not around, he'd said. I didn't know then that he meant permanently. The office smelled the same, cedar and varnish and something sweet I've never been able to name. I think now it might just be decades of sun soaked into old wood. I walked through every room. The workbench Grandpa built, still solid, still level. Grandma's paperback shelf, still organized by spine color. The little back room where she used to read to me on rainy afternoons. In the desk drawer by the window, I found an envelope, my name on the front in Grandpa's handwriting. Deborah had told me it would be there, that she'd been holding it until after the trust was fully settled. I opened it carefully. One page, blue ink, his handwriting looser toward the bottom the way it always got when he was tired. He wrote that he knew his sons would eventually try to sell the yard. He didn't blame Neil for it, not really. Neil was still his boy and he loved him. But Neil never understood the difference between something that has a price and something that has value. He said he'd chosen me not because I was perfect, but because I was the one who'd always asked whether the dock needed fixing before I ever asked what the property was worth. The last line read, "Take care of her. She took care of you first." I folded the letter, sat on the office steps, and just breathed for a while. Deborah called the following week with good news. The adverse claim could be withdrawn now that there was no active threat to the title. Once cleared, the property record would show the trust as sole owner, clean, no encumbrances, no clouds. Dean had settled with Titiline, paying the $35,000 penalty out of a personal loan. The deal itself was dead. As for the expired power of attorney, the district attorney's office was still reviewing the case. He could face a misdemeanor charge, possibly worse, depending on how the investigation concluded, and his license suspension would stand until it did. I sat with that for a moment. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt the particular exhaustion that comes after a long fever finally breaks, not sick anymore, but not quite steady yet either. There was one more thing, Deborah said. In the trust documents, your grandparents set aside a separate education fund, $42,000, specifically earmarked for your schooling. It's been accruing interest for 7 years. Current balance is just over $49,000. My eyes stung. $40,000. The same number Dean had dangled in front of me like a bribe. My grandparents had already set that money aside quietly, years earlier, without telling a single person. Juniper, are you there? Yeah, my voice cracked, just barely. I'm here. Your grandparents would be proud of you. I just kept a promise, Deborah. I enrolled at Fenwick Community College that fall, marine biology with a minor in small business management. The campus sat 25 minutes from the boatyard, closer than my parents' house. On the housing forms, under current address, I wrote the boatyard's address for the first time. It felt like coming home, because it was. I asked my parents to meet me at the coffee shop on Water Street, neutral ground, not the house, not the boatyard, somewhere public, somewhere calm. They arrived together. My father wore one of Grandpa's old flannel shirts, the one I hadn't seen him wear in years. My mother clutched her purse against her side the way she does when she's nervous. We ordered. I waited until the cups were on the table. I love you, I said. Both of you. I need you to know that, because what I'm about to say might not sound like it. My mother's jaw tightened, but she nodded. The boatyard isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. I won't be made to feel guilty for keeping a promise I made to Grandma, a promise she trusted me to keep because she knew nobody else would. My father stared into his coffee. I'm not cutting either of you out of my life, I continued. But if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be built on respect. Not on what I can give you financially. Not on guilt. Not on the idea that I owe you something just because you're my parents. My mother started to speak. We just wanted what was, then start by being honest about what actually happened. You tried to sell something that wasn't yours. You threatened to kick me out. You went through my things. She closed her mouth. My father still hadn't looked up. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it today. I stood, left enough cash on the table for all 3 coffees. I'll call you Sunday. He gave one small nod. I walked out into the sunlight. It was the most I could reasonably hope for right now, and it was enough. Oliver showed up at the boatyard one Sunday afternoon that May, carrying a pizza box, wearing the same oversized hoodie he'd had since middle school. Brought lunch, he said. Hope you still like pepperoni. Always. We sat on the office steps with paper plates on our laps, the pizza box between us. The cove was still, a heron standing motionless in the shallows near the dock, waiting for something below the surface. He ate slowly. He wasn't really there for the pizza. I didn't know about any of it, he said finally. Mom and Dad never told me. I know. Was I part of the problem? I looked at him, 14, thin-shouldered, still growing into whoever he was going to become. He hadn't chosen any of this. He hadn't asked to be the one whose hockey trophies got framed while mine sat in a trunk. You were a kid, Ollie. We both were. He nodded, pulled a piece of pepperoni off his slice and set it on the edge of his plate. It's really pretty out here, he said, looking out at the water. Grandma used to say the exact same thing every time she sat in that chair. He glanced at the empty chair beside mine, Grandpa's chair, the one with the armrest worn smooth from years of his hand resting on it. Can I come back sometimes? Anytime. He leaned his head against my shoulder for just a moment, then sat up and took another bite. We didn't talk about our parents. We didn't talk about trusts or lawsuits or forged documents. We talked about his season, about the heron, about whether the ramp needed new boards before summer. The boatyard didn't just protect a piece of property. It made room for something new to start growing. Early June, 6 in the morning. I was on the office steps with a cup of coffee, watching mist lift off Pinnacle Cove. The old pines along the shoreline stood sharp against a pale sky. Somewhere out on the water a loon called twice, then went quiet. I didn't win against my family. There's no real winning when the people who hurt you are the same people who were supposed to protect you in the first place. Nobody hands you a trophy for surviving something that should never have happened at all. But I kept a promise. And for the first time in my life, I was standing somewhere that actually belonged to me, not because I fought for it in some dramatic sense, but because 2 people loved me enough to plan for exactly this, years in advance. They saw the storm coming before I ever did. They built the shelter before I even knew I'd need one. My grandparents couldn't stop my parents from being who they were always going to be. They couldn't make my father less desperate or my mother less afraid. They couldn't keep Dean from chasing money that was never his to chase. But they could make absolutely sure I had ground to stand on. Literally. I think about that letter in the drawer sometimes, about Grandpa's words, the difference between something that has a price and something that has value. This boatyard has both, but only one of them can actually be measured, and my family spent 2 years focused entirely on the wrong one. I sip my coffee. The mist clears. The water turns blue. If you're listening to this and you feel like nobody's really in your corner, I want you to hear me on this. Sometimes the people protecting you aren't the ones standing right in front of you. Sometimes they planned for you years ago, quietly, without ever telling a soul. And sometimes all you have to do is show up, sign the paper, and keep the promise. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from standing on something solid and knowing exactly what you built your life on. That's my story. If it made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, or even just a little less alone, then it did. Exactly what I hoped it would. Now I have a question for you. If you could protect one thing in your life, a place, a person, a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it today. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. Check the description for more stories like this.